Gardening. I'm David Goodman. Last time we took a tour through some of the vegetable gardens at the IFAS / something. Okay, that's too complicated. The Orange County Extension Gardens. And we looked at different ways to grow vegetables. Today we are going to look at fruit. This is a Loquat tree right behind me. I hope you like fruit. This is used, I mean, this poor tree is like the landscaping tree all across Florida. This is a Loquat, and it's also known as the Japanese plum. And the fruits are delicious, and often it will produce twice a year just so the fruit can fall on the ground and rot because people don't eat it. This tree is one of the easiest fruit trees to grow in the state. You can harvest these suckers early in the year and cut them, dry them, make them into liqueurs. You can make them into chutneys, jams, and all kinds of stuff. They're a very delicious, sweet, tart tree. The problem is, it's very hard to find an improved cultivar of Loquat. There are some here and there, but most of them have just been grown from seedlings and sold to the nurseries, and then they grow up and you don't know what kind of fruit you're going to get. The fruit is almost always edible, but if you see an improved cultivar, there's apparently about 1,000 of them in Japan. You can get fruits about this big. Your average fruit here is more like a little guy like this. But it's a beautiful tree. It's evergreen year-round, which makes it great for the landscaping, but it's also a great source of delicious fruit. Let's just kind of wander around and see what trees they have here and see if there's anything interesting. The powder puff bottle brush tree. That's bees really like these guys. They don't make much to eat. You can make a tea out of them apparently, which I haven't tried. But the bees absolutely love the bottle brush trees, so they're worth adding to your yard just to bring them in. This looks like a nitrogen fixer here. Tipuana tipu. This is a nitrogen fixing tree. This is a classic tree. I'd love to grow this tree, but for some reason there aren't any pods on it right now, or some of them might kind of like fall in my pocket. Bauhinia. This is also known as the orchid tree. You can see why. This is a beautiful tree. My grandmother had a couple of these in her backyard when I was growing up, and she loved them. They also tend to invade your entire yard. They make pods that shatter on hot days and shoot the seeds all over the place, and then you'll have little babies popping up everywhere. This is fine. This tree is in the bean and pea family. See the divided leaves, like a bean or a pea. And it's a nitrogen fixing tree, so if you can grow these, or if you have them, plant them near your fruit trees to feed the fruit trees because they have a relationship with nitrogen fixing bacteria that makes the ground around them better. Well, let's keep wandering. Oh, Moringa. This is a Moringa tree, and it actually has pods on it. Where I live, a little further north of here, the trees tend to freeze down before they make pods, unfortunately. But these right here are loaded with seeds. This tree is one of the most nutritious plants on planet Earth. It's got all kinds of healing properties to it that they're just barely starting to understand. They use these leaves to treat malnutrition in Africa. You can just take these leaves and dry them out and add them to supplements, and they're better than taking a multivitamin. The tree grows really fast. You can also chop the bits and pieces of it up and use it for a fertilizer. The leaves are all edible, and these pods, when they're green, are a vegetable, and they're a delicious vegetable. It's just hard to grow them further north in Florida and actually get them to set pods. So this is really cool to see one with pods on it here. Of course, we're in Orlando, so we're in zone 9, and that's cool. It's cool to see. This tree here is it's a desert Cassia. It's another nitrogen fixer. Very cool looking tree. And again, with the nitrogen fixers, you kind of just want to mix them in. It's the bean and pea family, as you can see by these pods. Can you see that? It's the pods just like bean and pea family, same type of pods over and over and over again. And the leaves, these little divided leaves, you'll start to see this pattern. When you see this pattern, this is often a nitrogen fixing tree. Very useful. told you we were going to talk about fruit trees, and then I kind of took you wandering past other bits and pieces of trees, but here are actual fruit trees. This is an apple. There's a variety of low-chill apples for Florida, but they're not the easiest thing to grow. They tend to be needy trees. You can see these figs are asleep right now for the winter. They drop all their leaves and they'll come back again. Figs here I've seen growing up to 20 feet or more. I've seen massive fig trees, but often they tend to do this sort of a thing and branch up in a bunch of places. My bet is that they actually pruned this one down to the ground to get it to branch, which makes it a lot easier to harvest. You end up getting the fruit that way rather than the birds 20 feet up in the air. Got more figs. It's a brown turkey. Another fig. This is a green Ischia. It helps that they label them because they all look the same until they fruit. I have a very hard time telling figs apart by the leaves. The leaves are quite variable. This is a very popular fig. This is the Black Mission fig. Classic fig. Classic. This fig's actually starting to wake up here. Let's see what this one is. A little earlier. This is a jelly fig. This is supposedly a delicious variety. I have some in my nursery, but they haven't fruited yet, so we'll see what they taste like. And this one's a Magnolia Fig. This is another variety you'll see now and again. Move over here. This is one of my all-time favorite fruit trees in history. This is a mulberry tree. They usually start easily from cuttings. They're very productive. This tree is probably only 2 or 3 years old. They grow really fast and they produce buckets and buckets of fruit. They are uniquely and wonderfully suited to Florida. And I mean, if you do not have a mulberry tree, plant it. Just don't plant it next to your walkways where you're going to be staining everything purple. Don't park your car underneath it. Otherwise, it's a fantastic tree. This tree's looking pretty ugly right now, unless you're kind of into a minimalist sculpture. But this is a Japanese Fuyu persimmon. This is another one of your top survival trees for Florida. This is a fantastic fruit tree. It goes to sleep early in the fall and wakes up late in the spring, so it doesn't get nailed usually by rough frosts. And it produces delicious fruit. The Fuyu persimmon is non-astringent, meaning you can just eat it like an apple, even if it's not fully ripe. If you do that with an astringent persimmon, you will turn your mouth into burnt cotton. It's a great tree. These grow slower than the mulberries. This tree is probably a few years old, and they poke along, but they will be very productive and long-lived. This tree here is a pomegranate. It's also not very pretty right now. Pomegranate is not perfectly suited to Florida because it likes a kind of an arid climate. So what happens with your pomegranates here, they'll grow fine generally, they'll get spots in their leaves and you'll get spots on the fruit. The fruit don't look really pretty like they do when they come from California, but you will get good pomegranates here, and there is actually a Florida Pomegranate Association that's working on testing different varieties to get the pomegranates grown commercially in this state again. The wonderful pomegranate, which is a very common pomegranate in the grocery store, was originally developed in Florida and then was taken over to California where it did a little better. But it's an easy tree, it grows pretty quickly, and I mean, you can't beat having your own pomegranates because the fruits are so expensive in the store. Totally worth growing. Pomegranate. Russian pomegranate. Aha! This tree is at its best at this time of year. This is a peach tree. Peaches are not the easiest thing to grow in the world. They tend to be kind of needy also, but unlike apples, I think peaches are actually worth it. The apple, you get an apple, but with a peach, you get a peach. I like that. But the peaches here particularly have a problem with nematodes, which is why a lot of people have grafted varieties. This is a Florida Prince peach, which I believe was a University of Florida developed variety. They will put it on a rootstock called Nemagard, and they'll graft this rootstock, which is a really nematode-resistant rootstock, and they'll put another variety on top of it for fruit production. If you grow your own from seed, you can Just make sure you put a lot of compost around the base of it to keep it from those nematodes. This here is a pear tree. Normally, pears are a pretty darn easy thing to grow in Florida, provided you get varieties that are suited to the area. The old pineapple pear, the hood pear, oriental pears, Leconte pear, kefir pear. There's a bunch of different types that grow well here. This pear, however, is, as you can see, suffering from disease. This, to me, looks like fire blight. What happens with fire blight is it gets around, usually around the growing tips, it gets spread, and then it starts to spread down and eat into the tree. If this pear tree doesn't get trimmed back and cleaned up pretty soon, it will probably succumb to the virus. The virus will spread all the way through, get into it, and kill it. It's unfortunate. If you see black areas on your pear trees that are starting to burn back, it also affects apple trees and a variety of other members of the Rosaceae family. If it starts to come back, you start to see these black die-off things and it looks like it's just been burned by a fire. Cut that off. Do not throw it in your compost pile. Throw it in a burn barrel. Burn it. Do not let it spread. And you can often beat it back. I had pear trees that had it all over the pear trees. I gave it a really severe pruning. We didn't get fruit that year. The next year the plants were perfectly fine. Often happens if you have a lot of rain and the bacteria starts to grow and the spores start to spread and it drips all over the tree, and then it's all over. But it's too bad. Pears are normally a great tree for here. This here, I mentioned it a minute ago, but I didn't realize I had one here. This is a pineapple pear. This is a variety of pear that has a good pear flavor with a bit of a pineapple overtone to it. It's a hard pear, a cooking pear, a very tough tree. Great for making everything from sliced pears to pies to salsas to jam and all kinds of stuff. This is like the pear your grandmother grew, and it's a wonderful, wonderful variety of pear. And it's one that I carry in my nursery because it's got a respectable pedigree and it stands. You can see it doesn't seem to have any disease issues, even though it's close to that one that's torched, and there's another pear over there that's got some fire blight as well. But it'll look beautiful in a couple of weeks when all the blooms start coming out and the buds start growing again. Not beautiful right now, but it will be. Good pear. This here is another fruit tree for Florida that unfortunately is having some trouble thanks to laurel wilt disease, which is spread by the ambrosia beetle, which came in from overseas and has been causing trouble. A lot of our laurel trees have been dying, and they are relatives of this tree, which is an avocado. Some of the avocados through the state have been hit, and they're trying to determine which ones can stand it, and they're doing all the research they can to keep them going. Generally, an avocado tree is a really easy tree to grow. It's a nice tough tree, and the problem is that not all avocado trees can handle the entire state. You've got to get avocado trees with cold hardy Mexican variety genes to push them further up into the state. Those are the ones that can handle weather down into the teens when they hit maturity. Further south, from about the middle of the state south, you can grow the tropical varieties and the Hass avocados. They can take a little bit of frost, but they can't take very much of it. And if you get some of those cold overnight, say Jacksonville lows, you're going to have some problems. Avocado is a great tree. It's worth tucking in. If you're not sure about how cold hardy the avocado you have is, tuck it underneath the edge of a canopy where there's some oak trees, that sort of thing. Keep it kind of nestled in where it's going to be protected a little bit from the cold of space overnight. It's a good tree. Now, this is a tree you would normally associate with the Mediterranean. I have a couple of these growing in my yard. People go, oh, what is that, some sort of an oak? No, this is an olive tree. In Florida, there's a couple of varieties of olives that'll grow pretty good. There's actually a olive oil producing grove up in Citra, Florida. They can handle some cold, and they're quite a productive and fantastic tree to grow. And as you can tell, it's a beautiful tree just to tuck into your landscaping. I've seen them way overhead. They tend to generally be somewhat slow growing. Some of them are more precocious than others. Arbequina is the name of the variety that's often recommended for Floridians. Again, like the pomegranate, it's more of an arid climate type of a tree. You think of Israel and the Middle East, etc., you think of olives. But some of these varieties can really handle Florida's weather and thrive here. So if you want some extra virgin, beautiful, home pressed olive oil, plant a couple of these. That's a little bit of a tour of some of the fruit that they have here at the Orange County Extension. They also have airplane trees just going overhead. It's beautiful. Very productive. Expensive. As you see, I took you on a tour of some fruit trees for Florida here at the Orange County Extension. You probably noticed I didn't touch on citrus at all. They do have citrus trees here, but there are so many diseases for citrus in this state at this point, from greening to canker. In my opinion, I wouldn't count on a citrus tree. Grow them for fun, but don't count on them being there necessarily. There's been some serious issues. So I don't cover citrus generally as a survival crop because it's not reliable anymore. I would say out of all these trees that we saw, my top three would be the Loquat, the Persimmon, and the Mulberry. Those trees will almost always produce for you consistently. They're productive, they're really easy to grow. Beyond that, move into pears. After you're in pears, then you could start looking at other trees that are more difficult. Maybe peaches, nectarines, plums, unless you have the native plums, which are really easy. You're kind of getting into more difficult territory. So if you get that core of Loquats, Mulberries, Persimmons, then you could move out from there. At some point in the future, we'll have to talk about nut trees, but that's another episode. Thanks for being with me.